this time I'm virtually visiting Austin, Texas, and I've had the chance to be in Texas a couple times, but never Austin, unfortunately. I'd really like to go. But I'm here with Brother James Scott, who is currently the Junior Warden and Master Mason of the Year for 2022 for, and you just told me and I forgot,
Mount
uh,
Bonnell.
Mount Burnell. There you go. I was going to come on with it. Mount Burnell Lodge in Austin, Texas. Thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for having me.
So first of all, congratulations, Master Mason of the Year. When did you find out that you would be the recipient of that, of that award, of that designation, and what was it like to receive it?
I found out actually at the end of the year banquet. I really didn't have a clue. Then I'll be honest with you, I really wasn't thinking about it. I was just, doing what I love to do. But actually receiving the award was actually really surprising because I've never really received awards. You always get the certificates for participation and thanks for being here. But I mean that one was it was really special for me, and I really appreciate all the brothers thinking about me in that regard.
Now, tell me a little bit about your Masonic journey, kind of getting to the place where you are now, Junior Warden, Master Mason of the Year. When did you first join Freemasonry, and what was it that encouraged you to look into joining?
Man, okay, so I've wanted to be a Mason since I was 4 years old. I remember I'm originally from Houston, Texas, and I remember taking the bus, and I will never forget it. We're going up West Belford Street, and I would always see this building. Most of the time, the parking lot was empty, but man, when there was people there, the parking lot was full. And every so often, I would see these guys come out, and they're like feeding the homeless. They're helping women who had like lost their husbands and stuff like that. And when I found out later on that these guys were Masons, and that was actually Temple Lodge number 4 under the Grand Lodge of Texas, I thought that was so cool, and I never forgot it. It stuck with me to even to this day. And then I find out in my own family history that my grandfather on my father's side, who I'm actually named after, I found out that he was a Mason and he was a Shriner. And I learned about some of the work he did, so that just kind of confirmed it for me. So I was always interested in doing it, but I guess you could say for years I was scared to actually make the move because we were all in that to be one ask one. And actually, the very first time I asked a guy about being a Mason, he turned me away.
And we're back. We actually have been joined by not a Masonic brother, but one of Brother James Scott's Greek fraternity brothers, Corey Greathouse. And we're talking to him as well to get kind of the outsider perspective of Freemasonry and what some of his thoughts of it. But before that, going back to Brother Scott, so you're talking about, your interest in the craft. You would actually ask somebody about joining, and I guess they didn't get back to you, or they didn't encourage you to join at that time. But what happened
Right,
after that?
right. So I ended up running into a friend of mine who was already a Mason, and I actually found that on social media. So I asked him about it, and he gave me a petition, and it turned out the District 15A in Houston, they were hosting a drumline competition, which had me nervous as heck because I mean it's not like I was just dealing with a couple friends of mine. Now I'm dealing with everybody in the area. So I walk into the building. I had my petition, and I'm looking for my buddy Wayne. Well, Wayne introduced me to one of the Grand Lodge officers, who was also a member of the lodge. Ended up joining, and this guy told me he points across the room. He said, "You see those group of guys? Because I only had one signature on my petition." He says, "I want you to go over there, talk to one of those guys, and convince them to sign your petition." So I went up and I talked to a guy named Kerry, and we had this long talk about why do I want to join, what he expected out of me if I did join, what would my expectations be. Do I have a problem with community service? What does my, how does my family feel about it? I mean, he literally he he gave me 25 questions, man, and it wasn't like it was just a one-on-one question. I was literally surrounded, and these guys were really they questioned me hard, and he signed my petition, and I took it over to um, Maple Leaf Lodge number 147, and I ended up getting initiated, passing raised with three other guys. And from that day to this, I still check in with both Wayne and Kerry. And I always say, hey, I pray to God I'm not letting you guys down. Like I said, nobody's perfect in masonry. We're always going to be learning. But I promised myself that I was going to work hard, do what I need to do to try, not just to make my self look good, but to make sure I make those guys proud. And then let's see, 2016, I ended up moving here to Austin, and I transferred my membership to Mount Bonnell Lodge number 2. And I'll be honest, all the lessons that I learned in Maple Leaf 147, because Maple Leaf 147 had an expectation out of me. If I walked in, I mean, because some lodges are allowed to use the ritual in meetings. Well, my worshipful master who raised me, Johnny Simpson, he made I would take after I would watch these guys, him, and we had another guy named Sam Williamson. And I would just watch these guys. They could, you pick out a page in the book, they knew it by heart. And I consider these guys my double Michael Jordans of masonry. I mean, they could do it all. And I was like, I wanted to be like them. They could do the work in the lodge when it's time for community service. Boom, they're there. If another lodge needed help with something, boom, they're there. And I said, I want to be like them. And I call them, my mentors in masonry. And I always pray, hey, I hope I'm not letting you guys down. If you see me doing anything I can improve on, let me know. So I took all the lessons they taught me, all the examples they showed me, and I took that to Mount Bonnell Lodge number 2. And I said, hey, I'm off the leash now. Let's get to work.
Before we go any further, I gotta ask, as a Canadian boy, do you know where Maple Leaf Lodge, where the name Maple Leaf came from? I mean, I'm assuming maple trees. That's a Canadian, our flag's got the maple leaf right in the center. So it's a neat little connection from way down in Texas up here to Canada.
You know what? I was told one time, and I'm sorry, I totally forgot what it meant, what the connection was. But yeah, I was told when I first joined, I need to get back on that.
No worries. If anybody knows out there watching, throw it down in the comments because that's kind of cool. Well, you talked about, and we talked about this offline, but just in your answer, you talked about the inspiration that you took from the brothers and from their kind of mastery of the ritual and of the work and the way they handle themselves within lodge and community. And we talked offline a little bit about how you try to impart that same thing in Mount Bonnell with the newer Master Masons. So what lessons do you try to impart to newer Master Masons, to even individuals who are interested in joining the craft or becoming Freemasons? What lessons do you try to impart onto them?
For one, I've always been the guy. If you didn't have a friend in the world, you got one when you met me. And I try to impart to our newer brothers, treat your brother like a brother. Nobody's perfect. You'll bump heads every once in a while. It's happening. We're human. But treat your brothers like brothers. Another thing, always represent the lodge in the highest of integrity. Don't it. Even when you're not in the lodge, you don't have on the aprons and the collars. You're still a representation of the lodge because a lot of people might not know your name, but if they seen you in that apron and those collars and the gloves, they know you're a Mason. So if you're out here, you know, acting crazy, doing crazy stuff, people want to remember that. Also, when we're doing work, when there's work to do in the community, show up. Um, I always tell people because we all have our social functions and fellowship, and that's good. That's needed because that's how you build personal relationships. But I always tell people you're more likely to catch me at a community service event than a party because our one of our missions is to serve the community, and I want service to be, I want that in your spirit. Service should be in your spirit, and those are probably the biggest lessons I try to impart to new master masons: service, treating your brothers with respect, treating them like a brother, and like I said, service.
Now, you know, what are some of the ways? Because as I mentioned, I've never had the chance to visit any Masonic lodges in Austin or much of Texas. My Texas experiences have always been in the Dallas Fort Worth area. Um,
Mhm.
what are some of the events and the ways that Mount Bonnell Lodge is, and even Maple Leaf Lodge before, is of service to the community? What are some of the events that you've been either have done recently, or what are some things coming up in 2022 for you guys?
So there's two ways I try to do this thing. So a lot of people have called me and other people the Texas Masonic Bridge Builder. Okay, as you know, we have recognition and visitation with the Grand Lodge of Texas. So what we'll do, some of the events we'll do is, of course, we'll go out, we'll feed the homeless, we'll provide scholarships, we'll host events for the widows of Master Masons. We'll do like helping repair housing, that's been damaged and stuff like that. But also, what we'll do is we'll partner up with, let's say, a lodge out of the Grand Lodge of Texas, and most of the time, well, I mean, we'll partner with anybody, but sometimes we'll partner with the Grand Lodge of Texas. Hey, what events do you have going on? And whatever output that they can put out, we'll try to add to it. Like there's one lodge, University Lodge number 1190. They put on a barbecue for a children's shelter. And the first time we did it, we just showed up. They just asked us, "Hey, just come out." But now we're in a part where, okay, we're putting on the gloves and getting dirty with you. Now, what do you need from us? How can we add to this, add value to your event? We'll partner with the NAACP with scholarships, like any organization that's the service that's in the area. We'll usually pop up and help them out. And really, with all of the new organizations that's coming to Austin, we're still figuring out who's out there. And whenever we do, I'm making a phone call. Somebody's making a phone call. Hey, what do you need? And we'll partner up with them.
You mentioned at the start of your answer, this is a great thing to talk about. This is the first recording I've done since the mutual recognition treaty was signed in Georgia between the Grand Lodges there. And I know you posted that on your Facebook. A lot of my friends in the craft have posted the event on their social medias and on their socials, just as a Prince Hall Mason, from Texas, um, where there is mutual recognition. We're the same thing in Ontario. I don't know when it took place, but since I've been a Mason, I joined in 2007. There's always been mutual recognition between our Grand Lodge and Prince Hall Grand Lodge in Ontario. But what were your thoughts and just what do you think about? It took a long time, but having that recognition between the Grand Lodges of Georgia being formalized and being signed.
I thought it was awesome. Um, I thought it was a long time coming. I thought it definitely needed to happen. Um, both both Grand Lodges are regular Grand Lodges, and it kind of felt like the only reason that it hadn't happened was race. I mean, if you look, most of the Grand Lodges that didn't have recognition were here in the South. I mean, we were late to the party, and I think it's a work in progress because I think the old ways of the South had a heavy influence on the Grand Lodges, and I can say that for both sides. I can definitely say that for both sides, but I think that the Grand Lodges are slowly getting younger. There's more technology. Um, Prince Hall is starting to have more influence. Let's just go ahead and keep it real. Both sides are losing membership. Membership is dying off, stuff like that. So I believe both sides needed to do something to clear the air, but also show, hey, we're not about these old ways anymore. Let's do something new. And I believe Georgia taking this step, it was a great step. I mean, the visitation is going to be revisited within 10 years. I know there's been a lot of different opinions about that, but hey, one step at a time, right? So who knows? Things could change. They might, hey, let's go ahead and decide to go ahead and do visitation. Stuff can change. But I definitely thought that was a great step. I think, to be honest, for Georgia, I think the catalyst behind that was what happened at Gate City Lodge number 2 in Georgia. With that whole situation, I really think that opened the eyes for a lot of Georgia Masons that hey, we need to fix this. The race should not be an issue in Masonry. And just like I mean, since it's new right now, there's still gonna be hard feelings on both sides. There's gonna be some guys that's cool with it, some guys that's not. Texas, for example, is we're still working through it. It's been getting better year by year, and that's a good thing. And Georgia's gonna follow. But I also do think it puts pressure on the other states that don't have recognition. So I think there's only what 4 or 5 states that don't have recognition with each other yet, and I think that puts pressure on them to hey, let's get this together. I mean, this shouldn't be an issue anymore. Let's kill it.
I agree. Yeah, I don't know the number off the top of my head. It is a small number that don't have recognition, and it's unfortunate. And I thought it was great to see Georgia and great to see the Masonic response to it. Like I saw brothers posting about it and attending the event from like Martin Fox. He's a brother from England, uh, Lewis Masonic, and he traveled all the way down. I don't know if it was exclusively for the event, but he was there for it, and his home base is across the pond. So it was a big deal in Freemasonry around the world, and I thought it was great to see. And like you said, right, one step at a time. That's how Masonry grows. That's how everything grows, is step by step.
Right.
I'm actually curious about the Prince Hall perspective on this because I don't have a ton of information. Um, but the one thing that I've been really trying to focus on with Square and Compass and my work in Freemasonry is the physical assets of the craft, like our temples and our cathedrals and our Masonic halls. I'm trying to preserve those because many of them are older buildings, heritage status buildings. And it's unfortunate in Ontario, we've lost several over the years for various reasons. But I trying to preserve the architecture and the buildings. I know that there's one Prince Hall Masonic Temple, and I believe it is in Alabama, which it's in the South, which they are trying to protect and get heritage designation status for. But the Prince Hall Masonic buildings and Masonic temples, whether it be Texas or other ones you visited, kind of, I mean, are they as well heritage properties or designations, or what are the physical buildings? Are they community centers? Are they used for other things beyond Freemasonry? Just the physical infrastructure of Prince Hall Freemasonry.
Well, I know most of the lodges have their own buildings. Like I said, our Grand Lodge is located in Fort Worth, and a lot of the lodges are in the process of we actually started a project a couple years ago where we're raising money to fix up our buildings. As a matter of fact, was it last year or so? We had a big old storm here in Texas, and it actually caused a lot of flooding in the Grand Lodge, and that's one of the reasons why we haven't been in the Grand Lodge for the past couple of years. There was a lot of flooding, a lot of damage. So first thing we did was we started a project to repair the Grand Lodge building. Now that's done. Now we're focusing on the local lodges. And every year, we're either getting grants or the Grand Lodge is giving money to different lodges so we can help repair those buildings. Because here in Texas, in order to become a historical landmark, even on a state level, pretty much all your repairs have to be done. I mean, and after that, there's nothing more you can really do except touch up and cut the grass, right? So over the next few years, we're focusing on fixing up our buildings. I know Mount Bonnell, we're in the process of doing that right now, and we're over halfway. We're almost done. We have just a few touch up items, and we'll go in at least once or twice a month, and we'll continue those repairs. But over the next few years, a lot of our buildings are either going to look different or we're purchasing new buildings. I know down Grandmaster's Lodge, St. James number 71, they're in the process of building a brand new lodge. So it's going to be a process, but it is definitely something we're doing.
That is awesome, and I think that's great to hear. The to your knowledge, um, is that happening outside of Texas as well? To your knowledge, if other Prince Hall Grand Lodges, um, or even at the local lodge level, are engaged in similar activities to either preserve their buildings or find either better suited buildings or preserve and get historical landmark for their temples and their buildings.
Yes, yes, I do know. And I think it was Pennsylvania. Their Grand Lodge just got the historical landmark designation. I know I have a few cousins out there in Pennsylvania. They have totally renovated. I know a few lodges with the help of, I think, with the Grand Lodge Estate assistance, they've just come together, redid the whole lodge. And yeah, so there's been a few jurisdictions that I know of that have been working on getting historical landmarks and restoring their buildings. So I think it's a good job by everybody, especially, I mean, at least the ones that I know of.
That's I think that's awesome, and keep me informed about that, because that's something that every Grand Lodge can learn from, because preservation of our buildings is, and or the facades or the whatever, preservation of part of our buildings is such an important thing, an important part of the craft, I think, that sometimes gets overlooked uh, far too often.
And
I got
another
to
thing
ask
that we're
you
doing,
another.
I was gonna say another thing that we're doing is that I found a lot of artifacts of our lodge. I found dues cards from 1914. And of course, my lodge has been around since 1875, but we've been in our building since our current building since 1950. And
Do you mind if I ask, so before you go on, do you mind if I ask, on the dues cards, did it say how much dues were? I'm always fascinated by the cost of dues back in the day. If I recall correctly, in my lodge, which was started in 1921, dues were $4 a year in 1921, if I recall correctly. Did the dues card say how much it was in 1914?
yeah, the ones I saw, it was like $3, and I thought that was pretty cool. But so what we're doing, a lot of the lodges around here, we're taking those artifacts, we're either turning it into the Grand Lodge so they can display it in their museum, or they're starting their own museum and starting that as a nonprofit. Matter of fact, was it last year? I found, cause we have three lodges that meet my building, and Lions Junior number 290. I found their very first lodge minutes, their very first lodge meeting minutes from 1908. And I thought that was so cool, and so I was able to present that to the Worshipful Master, and they were very grateful.
That is awesome. And that brings me to another part of the project I've been working on is not only the preservation of the physical building, but the preservation of the intellectual property, for lack of a better term, the records, the minute books, the dues cards. I don't know if you heard about what happened in Zanesville, Ohio. There was a fire in their Masonic building, and it was very, very significant fire. Basically, all of their records and minute books and letters and everything going back to I forget, 18 something, were completely destroyed. Um, and I've been using that as an example of the importance of lodges taking the time to preserve these records by keeping them in a fireproof location or documenting them through scanning, getting scanners and digitally preserving them, so if anything does happen, they are at least the information is protected, and even keeping them in a place that's safe from you know any Masonic temple, the Windsor Masonic Temple. We have to worry about things like flooding and upkeep, and what if mice gets into it, just finding these things and then protecting them by digitization, by good record keeping, by good storage. I think it's a really important thing. So that's really cool that you found those dues cards and minute books. And I think that's awesome. I think that's a big part of the craft too that gets overlooked, is maintaining these records and these items for future generations. That's really cool. Is that the oldest thing you found? The minute book from 1908?
Yes, that was the oldest thing I found. But actually, like to your point, we have a guy here in Texas by the name of Curtis Black. And Curtis Black, like you said, scanning and digitizing different minutes and stuff, he's all over that. Him, out of Georgia, I think he's out of Alabama. You have Right Worshipful Dave Gillard, who was the Grand Historian for Alabama. And then you have Right Worshipful Oscar Allen, who's a Junior Grand Warden for the Grand Lodge of New York. These guys are all over it. And I mean, it is really impressive, some of the stuff they found. And when they do find it, if they don't turn it into the Grand Lodge, they're scanning it, and they're putting these delicate materials in places where it can be preserved. So shout out to those guys.
I agree. I've actually had Brother Oscar Allen, on the podcast a couple of times. He's a really cool guy. I don't envy him at all, his job the last couple of years, or his work. That can't have been easy, but he's this really, really cool guy.
Oh yeah, yeah. I think a lot of us consider him our mentors. I mean, this guy is on it masonically. As far as his job, I do not envy that guy. I know he's been busy.
He has been for sure. So hopefully he's getting some well-deserved time off in the coming months, because he deserves a vacation. Um, the I think most Masons would agree that the way to a Mason's heart is usually through his stomach, which brings me to your current position. I'm not sure. I believe it works the same in Prince Hall. We talked about it a bit offline, right? In my lodge, Grand Lodge, Ontario, the junior warden is normally the one responsible for making sure there's food and refreshment after meetings, with the help of the stewards. I know you're currently the junior warden, so what's that been like? Um, and did anything surprise you about like being the junior warden? Because I find in my experience, for a lot of guys, the junior warden spot is when that's when they really start to think about the next steps in their Masonic career and moving to the East and becoming a worshipful master. That seems to be the moment when they start to I don't know what the right word is. That seems to be the moment where they start kind of thinking about and making plans about their year as master and what that might be like. What have you found it like being in the junior warden's chair? Um, and actually, well, first, when were your installation? When did you become installed as a junior warden, and what's it been like so far?
Well, I got this is actually my first year as junior warden. Um, I got installed last April, and I've loved it. As far as like having like fellowship after the meetings. Usually we'll just pick a day and we'll go hang out. We'll bring the family, bring the kids. We'll go kick it. Um, and I love that. One thing that I've always wanted to do that I've attended a few of them was put on a festival board. We've never done one in Prince Hall, Texas. Now we put on a table lodge, but that's a little different. But I'm actually working on putting that together, and that's going to be awesome. Being junior warden, it's been fun, and as you said, it does make you think about what's coming. I know, unfortunately, some lodges when they become master, it's like they just wipe away everything the previous master did. One thing that I've been taking in my time in masonry is I take a little bit of what everybody's done, I write it down, especially something that's been a good idea. Let's keep that going, So, and I think doing that, it makes it a little bit easier to move to the next seat because all you're doing is you're picking up the good ideas that the previous master or the wardens have done, and you're keeping that going. But now, let's say if there's something you wanted to put on, you'll have support doing that because the brother's seeing that, hey, you're not just wiping away what the previous guy's done. You kept it going. That was a good idea. We had support for that. Hey, what do you want to bring to the table? I also feel that I actually feel that when you're a senior deacon on up, we all know as master secretary, there's a lot of paperwork that has to go up to grand. There's a lot of due dates and stuff like that. I actually feel that the master should slowly but surely start teaching the wardens and maybe even the senior deacon about those procedures. That way, when that guy does become master, he's not bumping his head or the secretary is bumping, smacking him upside the head. Hey, this due date's coming up, this paperwork's due. He kind of already has a flow of what's going on, what needs to be turned in, when it needs to be turned in. And I'm really grateful that, my worshipful master and our past masters, they actually, share that information. You know, we always say, hey, dues are due on this date, but nobody understands why. You know, this report has to go up by this date, but nobody knows why or what's in the report. So I'm really grateful that my lodge actually shares that information. So now when the next worshipful master goes up, he kind of has a better understanding of what needs to be done. So, like I said, I'm really grateful for that.
I think that's a really good point to bring up. I think a lot of lodges, just in my own personal experience, fall really flat in that area. Um, I, I think that's something Freemasonry in general could learn from. Like, there's the ritual side of things and the esoteric side of things, which is, I mean, obviously incredibly important. But there are a lot of guys who, they may understand the ritual and they know all the meanings and field definitions, but they have no idea how much it actually costs to run the lodge, or how much it costs to run the building, or what the requirements are from Grand Lodge in terms of forms that need to be filled out. And sometimes when those guys get to the chairs, especially in leadership positions, that stuff can kind of get pushed aside, and then it creates a mess for the next person to have to try to deal with. There are really practical things that, even back to the building perspective, like, who gets the toilet paper, who pays the electrical bills, who does the cleaning, all of those things tend to get overlooked because people become, obsessed with, you know, how they defined this word in 1792 or something. There's some practical things that go into the business of Freemasonry as well, not the business, that go into the, I guess you want to call it business, but that go into the operations of a Masonic temple and the lodges that meet therein, that it's important that people understand, as well as the more esoteric and ritual side of the craft. I think that's a really good point to bring up, and something Masonry needs to do more of. Because, yeah, if you went to my lodge and asked people, you pay this much in dues, do you know how much of that goes to maintain the building? How much of that goes to our Grand Lodge? How much of that goes to the Junior Wardens Fund? Most of them would have no idea. I didn't until I became Worshipful Master, how things are portioned out. So that's a really good point to bring up. And, so that's one of those things that you've been working on as well, trying to impart to the newer guys and newer Masons in your mentoring role?
Yeah. Oh yeah, most definitely. I share everything that I know. If I learn any new information, I share it. And one thing that I share with new Master Masons, I always tell them this because I did it myself. Jump in the water. And what I mean by that is don't just be the guy who comes to the meeting. I mean, yes, we're glad to have you there, but get active. There'll be a day where the junior deacon doesn't show up, the junior warden doesn't show up for whatever reason, and we'll need a guy to fill in. Jump in, jump in, because I think that what that does is it slowly makes you more comfortable with making mistakes. Because if I know where you mess up at, where you need work at, then me as a more experienced master mason, I know where I can help at. Plus it gets you more comfortable in the lodge. So now I'm mentoring into you. So now when the new guys come in, you've been in what 6 months to a year. You're able to impart some of that knowledge to the new guy. So now this guy can come in and say, "Hey, he hasn't been here that long. He knows this and this and this. I'll be able to learn the same thing, no problem." And what we as experienced master masons need to do, we need to continue that as guys go into the seats, whether it's through practice, whether it's through a phone call. Hey, how you doing? How's the family? Do y'all need anything? That's one thing that I do with all the brothers. Hey, hey, how y'all doing? Y'all need anything? That I need to come over, what's up? And so I've noticed with our newer master masons, they're starting to do the same thing. So, just like we take those 3 steps in masonry, you go from, childhood, adolescence to grown man. I really feel that we spend most of our time in masonry in that adolescence, that fellowcraft stage where we're learning, we're imparting to the new guy. So I try to make it a point to love on new guy, encourage them to jump into the water, and you know I don't want to say outright correct them, but nudge them to where they can improve, help them to improve, because what, somebody's doing that for me, and so I try to pass that knowledge. There's been times where I've been called to another lodge, or when I became a Royal Archmason, it's like, Jay, I need you in this seat. Didn't know what in the world I was doing. But then that the high priest came to me after the meeting. Hey, let's do this. Work on this, man. You did good. Work on this. So I take that and I bring it back to my Blue Lodge. And you know what? It's increasing membership. I notice, because it's not just me doing it. It's the master doing it. It's the past master doing it. It's the senior warden. Everybody's doing it. It's slowly increasing membership. I mean, I'm talking about membership that's active, and it's making the newer guys who come in more comfortable. So I make a point to do that.
Now, this is something I don't think I'm trying to remember. I don't think I've ever really discussed it on the podcast before. I don't know if I've ever had any guests who I could discuss this with before. But one thing we talked about offline, and we have, um, one of your not Masonic brothers here, but fraternity brothers from the Greek system, Corey Greathouse here. How did, and I'm curious myself because I was never involved in a fraternity in university college. How did the Greek system, or what parallels do you see between the Greek system and Freemasonry, and do you think being part of a fraternity helped you in becoming and being part of Freemasonry? Do you see parallels between the two? Just what's that experience been like? Because it's something I know very little about.
Oh, most definitely. So actually, I became a Mason first, and actually, I joined Phi Beta Sigma fall 2020. Um, um, Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated was founded January 9th, 1914 on the campus of Howard University. Our founders are the Most Honorable Alex Taylor, Senator of Morris Charles I. Brown. Actually, two of our founders were Masons, and and I can actually say that about a lot of the fraternities in our council. They have somebody, who were their founders, who was a Mason, and a lot of similarities I see. The brotherhood, a lot of stuff that we do in the lodge, like getting together, like you said, the junior warden, he handles the fellowship side along with the stewards. We do a lot of that in Phi Beta Sigma. The the charity work, the community service, we do a lot of that in Phi Beta Sigma. Not only do we do a lot of that, we have national partnerships for that. Like right now, we're doing March of Dimes, which is the same thing we're doing on the lodge, on in the lodge on a smaller scale because we're statewide. Phi Beta Sigma is doing it internationally. Um, the mentorship, we have international programs for mentorship. You want to start a business, we have somebody who owns a business who will mentor you in how they started their business. You have somebody who's working on a doctorate. Actually, Brother Greathouse is working on his doctorate. Any day now, we'll be saying Dr. Greathouse. And I'm pushing for it and I'm encouraging this man to finish this dissertation. He's almost done. He's kicking butt. But we have somebody who has gone down that road. Just like we say in our rituals, who's gone down this road before me. We have somebody who's done that, who's coming back and mentoring you. And like for me, that's what I wanted. That's what I need. Like I said, these two organizations have been my dream come true because everything I wanted in brotherhood, everything I wanted in mentorship, everything I wanted in development, I have it right here in these two organizations. And I'm able to take that knowledge and impart it to the next brother. And the same thing that's happening in my lodge is happening in my Sigma chapter. My Sigma chapter is a brand new chapter. And we've gone from the original members, which was like 12 or 13 brothers. Now we're like over 46. So it's working, and I love it.
That brings us to Mr. Greathouse, I guess, soon to be Dr. Greathouse. Corey, how's the dissertation going? When will it be? When will we be calling you doctor? When does that switch take place?
Well, I've actually set a goal for myself to get the dissertation off my desk pretty much at the end of this semester, beginning of summer. so that when we do come back in the fall, for the fall semester, I'll be able to defend and uh, move on to being Dr. Greathouse. So that's my goal right now. That's where all my energy is being focused. Yeah.
I imagine that takes a lot of energy. I've never tried to get a PhD. I'm not that smart, but I can only imagine the amount of work and time it takes to do a dissertation. So yeah, I wish you the best of luck for sure. That's awesome.
Oh, thank you for that. Thank
You
you. Yeah.
are
I'm sorry.
so you are a brother to James Scott, but not a Masonic brother in my case, but with his fraternity. So I'm just
Mhm.
curious, as an outsider, um, even just here today, what outsider from Freemasonry watching this interview and the podcast, and as somebody who's not a Mason, what are your what are your views on the craft, and did they change at all in meeting James Scott? Like, what's it been like? Have you learned anything more about the craft, or what have your thoughts been on Freemasonry?
Really looking at brother James and many of the other members of Phi Beta Sigma who are also Masons as well. I really see this in James though, specifically since I've gotten to know him since becoming a member of Phi Beta Sigma. But I've definitely seen, kind of as Brother Scott had mentioned, this whole spirit of service. And so to me, and of course, I only get to see the community facing side of the Masons. But what I've seen in Brother Scott and his work and things of that nature, it starts to really build up in my mind this importance, not just of the brotherhood, but also carrying through, following through on that community service. And like I say, Brother Scott's one of the guys that I've gotten to probably know even more so through my interactions with Phi Beta Sigma. And, he really does seem to exemplify, like, if you think about that image that he portrays as a Mason, as a Sigma, he really does portray that image of the community service, the hard work, the follow through that goes with that, as being, of monumental importance there. So again, just kind of watching him and his work, and as he switches back and forth, he's working on a community event with us one month, and then the next thing you know, he turns around and he's, looking for a venue or talking about a service event that might be coming through the Mason system. And, for someone like me, I'm looking at him and I'm just like, that's a lot of commitment. That's a lot of work. And he follows through with a smile. I never hear him making it seem as if it's a lot of work, when I know it's got to be a lot of work to balance the two organizations. But the way he puts it forward kind of just goes back to what he was saying earlier about that spirit of service. And I think that's something that resonates in him and becomes something that's very much a very positive model for people looking at him through that lens of both organizations, or folks who might maybe know him through one organization over the other. He's really exemplifying that.
And I think that's also shown again how I learned about Brother Scott through his receiving Master Mason of the Year award. Things like that demonstrate, I think, very well um, his commitment to the craft and to service. Um, and from the again a non-Mason perspective, it seems to me, and this is speaking as somebody from Canada, but who's interviewed and had the chance to visit Texas, it seems to me that in Texas, Freemasonry seems to be pretty well known compared to some other jurisdictions I visited to. The Alamo had a lot of Masons present, and it seems like Texas history and Masonic history is interconnected, and I've been to some other places where Masonry maybe doesn't have isn't as well known, or maybe there's some more misconceptions or conspiracies. It seems like Texas Freemasonry does seem to be well known and well respected as an institution. That just seems to be my perception. Would you say that's right, or in your experience, what is the view of Freemasonry in Texas in general?
And again, as someone who kind of sees it from the community side of it, as much as I might not recognize some of the images, the symbols, the things that would make me readily know that this is something affiliated with the Freemason system, I do have to say that I feel like I've definitely seen some sort of presence, a rather strong presence actually, of just a basic what is my basic understanding of the Freemason system. So I think for, like I say, someone who is completely outside of the system, I could readily say that I've seen a presence here in Texas that I'm not sure how it compares to other places that you've gone to that you've seen, but I would say that it's definitely a good presence here, very recognizable.
And I think that is that attests well to the work of the Grand Lodge of Texas, both Grand Lodges, Prince Hall, and the Grand Lodge of Texas, for the work that they've done in promoting isn't exactly the right word, because Masons hate that word as a general rule, but in ensuring that the positive aspects of Freemasonry and what Freemasonry is communicated well to the public.
Mhm.
Brother Scott, I have a question back to you. You mentioned this way at the start, and I did bring up your Master Mason of the Year designation. Your grandfather was a Mason, you said. Is he still around? Did he get to see you receive the Master Mason designation, and or did he get to see you join Freemasonry?
No, he actually passed away before I was born. I was able to read about him, ask my aunts about him, and that, I mean, looking at the work he's done in the community, because he was made a Mason in Alabama, and then he moved to Pennsylvania, and I mean, it just kind of confirmed, how I was feeling when I was young, especially with me being named after him. I mean, it just kind of confirmed it for me. But my father, like even my father, he was kind of questionable when it came to masonry. But over the years that he's seen the work that I've been doing, or the people that I hang around, my mother and father have gotten a lot more comfortable with masonry and with me being a mason.
The beautiful thing about Freemasonry is, I guess even if it's maybe a sadder thing or a more tragic thing, you find brothers from all over the world, and you find common points of similarity. My grandfather on my father's side was a Freemason. He also passed away before I was born, and I'm also named after him, my middle name. Uh, and I never got to meet him, but I always like to think that when I'm in lodge and going through ritual work and going through a special occasion, I always like to think that, well, it's nice to know that I'm repeating the same words that he said, and engaging in the same, I'm saying the words that he said and taking the steps that he took. But I always like to think that he's probably there in the lodge room somewhere with me. I've got his jewel and that. So obviously it's unfortunate we didn't get to meet our grandfathers, but I like to think we get to meet them through Freemasonry a little bit.
Oh yeah, I always think it's very beautiful when a father can raise his son up. I mean, the most beautiful but saddest thing I've ever seen was there was a father who was in the hospital, and he didn't have much longer to live, and he never talked to his son about becoming a Mason. Well, his son ends up joining his lodge, and the day that he was getting his third degree, the lodge made it so that the father could be there and the father raised the son. And right after that ceremony happened, he passed away. And that stuck with me because I was actually there to see it.
That definitely would stick with you in those moments, right? There's something about those sad moments that stick with you that are still they add to the, they're sad, but at the same time they're kind of wonderful moments at the same time. Where they stick with you. They add to the tapestry of the craft, and that's a really cool story. I've never, obviously, being in I've joined Freemasonry in 2007, so I've been part of many Masonic funerals and seen um, many Masonic families, but I've never had the chance to see, something like that take place. So that would stick with you for sure. That's one of those great Masonic memories that you want to keep with you. So in terms of new Masonic memories, you said you became junior warden in April. So does that was that April of last year? So
Yes, sir.
senior warden next on the right? All right. When do you take the spot in the West?
Well, we have elections on the 19th, and we have quite a few qualified brothers for this seat. So we're gonna sit back and see what happens. But either way, I'm there in service for the lodge. So
That is a great thing to hear. I've never. This just goes to show you, kind of the challenges some lodges are facing, and the idea of multiple people trying to get a spot. Usually, we're trying to find people to take a chair. So it's great to hear that there's multiple candidates for officer positions. That's very. I think that is a good indication of the strength of Mount Bonnell. So that's awesome to hear. So, sorry, when do your elections take place?
April 19th at 7:30.
Well, definitely keep in touch with us and let us know, because I would love to keep up with your Masonic journey, and knock on wood, when if/when, because I'm sure it'll happen, you find yourself in the East, give me get in touch. I would love the chance to maybe head down and visit and see you get installed, or just sit in lodge with you when you do find yourself as worshipful master. If you'll take somebody from Ontario, Canada, we're a little bit funny up here, but if you don't mind Canadians, I'd love to visit you.
The doors are open, man. We would love to have you, man. We love the fellowship. I mean that's one of the big things we love to do. We love to travel, visit other lodges. So yeah, you ever in Houston? Oh, down here in Austin, man. Hey, hit us up, man.
I would, and same thing goes for you. If you ever find yourself up in Canada, I know you mentioned maybe Toronto someday. We're not too far from Toronto. We're right next to Detroit. We're like the southernmost part of Canada, so we're not too far from Toronto. We're right next to Detroit. You're more than welcome to swing by. I'd love to have you visit the Windsor Masonic Temple.
Oh man, thanks, man.
Yeah. And with that, thank you guys both so much for joining me from Texas, both Brother Scott and Mr. soon to be Dr. Greathouse. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciated it. And it's great to learn more about Freemasonry in Texas, and also Prince Hall Freemasonry, and even the fraternity system in general. So thank you guys both so much.
Oh man, it was an honor to be here. Thank you for having us.